What's up, guys? Today you'll learn a simple but aggressive weapon against white's 1d4, the Nimzo-Indian defense. Instead of going into the slow and defensive Queen's Gambit structures, the Nimzo-Indian lets you strike immediately by developing quickly and pinning white's knight. This setup is sharp, active, and gives black a clear attacking plan. And although the position looks flexible, since white has many possible replies, your ideas stay simple, powerful, and easy to follow. The biggest advantage is that white cannot simply push e4 to dominate the center. That move is actually a mistake. If white tries it, you can capture the pawn immediately. The knight on c3 is pinned and cannot recapture, leaving white down a pawn while the knight remains vulnerable. This early pressure gives black a clear tactical edge and forces white to rethink standard central plans. Beyond this, the opening is solid and flexible. It avoids common traps, ensures smooth development, and provides a straightforward attacking plan. You can focus on putting your pieces on natural squares, exerting pressure on the pinned knight, and gradually preparing a kingside initiative without worrying about sudden tactical shots from white. The downsides are minimal. Humorously, some might call it a tariff for playing an Indian-style opening, but in practical terms, there are no major drawbacks. The setup is reliable and adaptable, and your strategy remains consistent regardless of white's response. The most traditional move for white is knight to f3, aiming to support the center and prepare castling. Even then, black's plan remains the same. Develop efficiently, control key squares, and create tactical opportunities when white overextends. This approach also works perfectly against the London system. Here, I recommend playing knight to e4, immediately challenging white's pinned knight. White can easily defend that knight with either the queen or the bishop, but this move has a deeper purpose. You want to firmly establish your knight in the center so you can smoothly transition into your aggressive plan. Some players may recognize a similar setup from the Rubinstein variation of the Dutch defense, which I covered before. But for this guide, I'm focusing on the strongest and most practical lines, especially the ones that work best against the London, based on all the feedback we've received. In this position, white will usually continue with pawn to e3. They could also play pawn to a3 to force the bishop trade, but as you'll see later, you plan to make that exchange anyway. So if white spends a tempo helping you, that's even better. After white plays e3, you develop your bishop along the long diagonal, since it is difficult to activate it effectively on the other diagonal. This sets up your attacking structure and brings your pieces to their most dangerous squares. After you capture on a4, white will move the bishop to one square or another. It makes no real difference. You then develop your light-squared bishop, which both supports your strong knight on e4 and begins aiming pressure toward white's kingside, where we expect the king to castle. In most games, white will indeed castle short. Once the king is castled, the pin on the knight disappears because the king is no longer on the same file. This means white is now ready to trade off your powerful knight on e4, something you definitely want to avoid. Instead, you voluntarily exchange your bishop so that your knight can remain firmly in the center. And because your knight controls the capture square, white is forced to recapture in a way that leaves doubled pawns. After this, you castle as well. This is exactly the structure you're aiming for. A dominant knight on e4, an active bishop pointing at the kingside, and thanks to the pawn on f5, easy access for your queen or rook to swing toward the attack. Altogether, this gives you a very strong and flexible attacking setup. At this stage, either the rook or the queen can quickly swing toward the kingside, and once that happens, the position becomes genuinely dangerous for white. What makes it even harder for white is that they do not have any straightforward plan to follow. Often, white tries to create some counterplay on the kingside or attempts to trade off their weakened doubled pawn, hoping to relieve some pressure. From here, you have two main strategic paths to choose from. If your goal is to play safely and build a very solid structure, then the setup you should aim for is pawn to d6, followed by queen to d7. This forms a harmonious and well-coordinated position where all your pieces support one another. It is the classical, reliable way to continue, strong, stable, and strategically sound. However, if you prefer a sharper style, or if you are playing blitz, you can immediately dive into a direct kingside attack. In fast time controls, I have found that this aggressive option often performs much better. The reason is simple. Defending accurately in such dynamic positions is extremely difficult, and white must find several precise moves just to stay alive. Most players fail to do that under time pressure. For this reason, you should not rely too heavily on computer evaluations like Stockfish in these positions. While the engine may show a balanced evaluation, practical human play is very different. In real games, especially blitz, the initiative and the speed of your attack matter far more, and those aggressive lines tend to bring the best results. Stockfish may claim that white is completely fine in this position, but in practical human play, finding the correct defensive moves is extremely difficult. Most opponents simply continue with their natural plan, often aiming for a harmless pawn trade that does very little to solve their larger problems. When this happens, you can calmly bring your rook to the king side. Combined with the pressure from your bishop, the attack starts to feel very uncomfortable for white. Sometimes white will try to push their pawns to chase your rook away and then dream of advancing further to drive back your queen or knight. Everything may look optimistic for white for a moment until your next move suddenly flips the position. Rook takes on g2. This is one of the reasons I love this opening so much. It contains numerous surprising and powerful sacrifices that appear out of nowhere. After white captures the rook with the king, you immediately bring your queen with a check. Once the king steps aside, a stunning double check follows, delivering an unexpected checkmate. These tactical motifs occur frequently and are extremely hard for white to anticipate. Another common attempt from white is to break the pin by developing the queen, either to c2 to protect the knight, or to b3 where it also attacks your bishop. In both cases, the simplest and most effective response is to remain calm and stick to your plan. You simply exchange the bishop and continue your setup without worrying about anything else. The position remains fully under your control. When white recaptures with the queen, they avoid doubled pawns, but your plan stays the same. You centralize your knight, hit the queen, and once the queen moves, you simply defend the knight with your pawn. Exactly what you want. After that, you continue normal development, placing your dark squared bishop on the long diagonal. If white plays bishop to d3 and then castles, you launch your main idea. Rook to f6, preparing a rook lift toward the king side. The rook can swing to g6 to attack the king, or to h6 to pressure other weaknesses. A very common mistake from white in this structure is knight to d2, trying to trade off your strong central knight. This often backfires and gives you tactical chances. Although white's idea may appear logical at first glance, it comes with a critical weakness. By moving the knight away, white removes the main, and in truth, the only piece that was defending the castled king. If you stop and examine the position, you will notice that almost all of white's pieces are stuck on the queen side, far away from the action, while the king sits completely unprotected on the king side. Because of this, you do not need to trade pieces on e4 immediately. Instead, you can stay fully focused on your attacking plan. The key move is rook to h6, taking advantage of the fact that the knight no longer controls the h6 square. Once the rook lifts to the king side, your intention becomes very simple. Bring the queen into the attack and deliver checkmate. If white decides to capture on e4, it might briefly seem as if white has tricked you by winning a pawn. But the illusion disappears instantly after queen to h4. This move creates a powerful double attack, threatening an immediate checkmate on h2 with queen takes h2. If white tries to block the checkmate threat, the bishop on e4 suddenly becomes undefended, again due to a double attack, and you simply capture it. White is now down a full piece and still under heavy pressure. Your attack on the king side continues without interruption, and in most cases, the game ends quickly in your favor.